Tonight on Primetime, the balance of power across the Middle East may be shifting as regional capitals seek greater control over how they deter threats and respond to future crises. Old alliances are giving way to the new. A new regional defence alliance is taking shape, with Turkey joining Pakistan and Saudi Arabia in a NATO-style pact. Ankara says the agreement is purely defensive and could eventually expand to include Egypt and other regional powers. Adam Morrow has more from Istanbul.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has said a new defense pact between Turkey, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia was not aimed at any particular country, including Iran, describing the alliance as a, quote, defensive in nature. Speaking to Turkish state media, Fidan compared the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement to NATO's Article 5 Collective Defense Clause, under which an attack on one member is regarded as an attack on all. He said the agreement seeks to strengthen regional stability by improving cooperation among the three signatories, rather than creating an offensive military bloc. Fidan stressed that Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are not pursuing expansionist policies, adding that the alliance has no dispute with any country unless one of its members comes under attack. He also said the agreement establishes a ministerial committee modeled on NATO's political and military structures, together with a permanent general secretariat to be based in Saudi Arabia. Fidan said Egypt could eventually join the alliance once certain technical issues were resolved, adding that the long-term objective is to expand the framework to include other regional partners. Turning to the South Caucasus, Fidan said a lasting peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan could eventually create the conditions for a broader regional security architecture. Once regional peace is achieved, he said, South Caucasus countries could develop institutional security arrangements similar to those now emerging in the Middle East, although he stressed that each region has different priorities. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Iran has cast the new trilateral defense pact as evidence that regional powers are losing faith in Washington as a security guarantor. Tehran says lasting stability must be built within the region, not purchased from outside powers. Turaj Shiraliliu reports from the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman's weekly briefing.
Iran's foreign ministry said Tehran has always supported regional states' efforts to establish security based on mutual trust, following the signing of a trilateral security pact between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Spokesman Ismail Baghai stressed that security is not a commodity to be purchased from what he termed extra-regional dealers. The Iranian official confirmed that Iran was informed of the provisions of the security pact before it was signed last week in Mecca. He said the agreement signaled the understanding among regional states that they can't rely on the United States and other countries for security, saying Washington is itself part of the security problem in the region. Asked about whether Iran has an interest to join the trilateral agreement, Baghai said Iran has been a pioneer in regional security arrangements. To a question on the Iran-Oman talks on the Strait of Hormuz and reopening of the waterway, the spokesman said that the negotiations are bilateral and between the two littoral states. The Iranian official said that experts are discussing the details of an agreement on shipping traffic, confirming that charging navigation service fees is one of the items on the agenda of discussions. He added that the maritime corridor was opened before the Israeli-US war against Iran, stressing that Iran is in the state of imposed war, and as long as the aggression continues, the strait will not reopen. According to Baghai, the US violated Clause 5 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding by escorting vessels from the waterway. The spokesman confirmed that Tehran and Washington are in contact through mediators, rejecting reports of any negotiations between Iran and the US. Tura Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry for A News.
Umair Aslam, founder and CEO of Global Defence Insight and co-founder and CEO of West Asia Watch, joins us from Islamabad. Umair, welcome to the program. Now, let's begin with the central question here. Is this, in your opinion, a credible collective defence alliance or largely diplomatic talk without a clear enforcement mechanism?
At this stage, the agreement appears more credible than a purely diplomatic symbolic statement, but it is still too early to treat it as a full instrumental collective defense alliance. The most important signal is the reported commitment that an attack on any single country of the trilateral agreement is considered as an attack of all three parties. This was reported by the Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister as well as the Foreign Minister, Mr. Ishaq Dar. So basically, I can clearly see that it is a credible collective defense alliance, not a largely diplomatic talk right now.
Okay. And Hakan Fidan insists that the pact isn't aimed at Iran. But when three major military powers create a NATO-style structure, why should Tehran accept that reassurance, do you think?
Basically, Pakistani as well as Turkish as well as the Saudi administration, along with their sources, assured that this alliance is not against the Iran. Basically, Pakistan as well as Turkey have a very good relationship with the Iran. So that's why I don't think so. They are going against the Iran. This is actually they are actually combining their arms and helping all the states in this trilateral agreement to defend against a common enemy, which is definitely not the Iran.
And if Saudi Arabia comes under attack, would Pakistan be automatically expected to intervene? And is Islamabad genuinely prepared for the military and political consequences?
Basically, you can see that the Pakistan and Saudi Arabia already signed an agreement in last year, September 2025, and both countries are already cooperating in the defensive security domain. Pakistani land forces are already deployed in the Saudi Arabia. Along with, we also have reports, some social media reports that the Pakistani air defense systems, along with the Air Force squadrons, are deployed in the Saudi Arabia for the defense of Saudi Arabia and their economic interests. So basically, if Saudi Arabia comes under attack, Pakistan is not expected to interfere. The thing here is that Pakistani forces are already deployed there. So basically, Pakistan would be going in the diplomatic domain. Maybe it's in Security Council's resolutions. Maybe it's the diplomatic means.
And Umar, Turkey is already a NATO member. What happens if its commitments to this new alliance conflict with the interests or decisions of its Western powers?
Right now it's very early to say anything about this agreement, about this pact, because still 3 years ago this agreement was signed, and again I must say that this is very earlier to assume that the Western powers must pressurize on Turkey why they agreed on on the terms of Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. So I think it's very early to comment on this.
And now let's look at America. They still have bases, military reach, and intelligence network, but has it lost its region? Has it lost the region's trust and its monopoly over the region? How regional security is organised? Has it lost what it's had there?
Yes, you are absolutely right. During the conflict, American conflict with the Iranians, American forces deployed in the Middle East, especially Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, they were failed to intercept the Iranian incoming missiles as well as drones. we saw that a lot of Iranian missiles, Iranian drones are targeting the different sites in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, as well as other GCC countries. So apparently, America is failed in securing its interest as well as securing its allies against the Iranian missile and drone attacks. So that's why the basically the America still has the basis, but it lost the region's trust. So that's why a lot of countries in the region are going toward the alliances with other countries. For example, Pakistan last year signed an agreement with the Saudi Arabia signed an agreement with the Pakistan last year September, and currently in 3 days ago, Saudi Arabia again signed an agreement with the Turkey and Pakistan. And we can expect that a lot of other countries could join this pact, most probably Kuwait as well as Egypt. So apparently, the monopoly of America is largely it could be reorganized in a way that the other countries could gain the importance in the region.
Okay, Umar, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime this evening. I appreciate your analysis.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
After the break, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have signed a new joint defence agreement pledging to treat an armed attack against one member as an attack against all three. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. A major rift has opened between Israel and the United States over Washington's plan for Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli troops will remain until Hamas is completely disarmed.
Israeli forces will not withdraw from Gaza until Hamas is fully disarmed. That's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at a cabinet meeting on Sunday. It marks Israel's first official rejection of US President Donald Trump's 15-point plan. He said Israeli forces would continue carrying out attacks in Gaza to thwart threats. Netanyahu said Tel Aviv is still discussing the document with the United States, with some proposals acceptable to Israel and others not.
Israel rejects the 15-point plan. I heard that there were those who said, "You didn't say it," but we did say it, and here, I am saying it again. Israel rejects 15-point plan. The IDF will not carry out any withdrawal until the dismantling of Hamas and its weapons. And when I say dismantling Hamas and its weapons, that means heavy weaponry, less heavy weaponry, and smaller arms. All weaponry.
The plan was drafted in May by Nikolay Mladenov, the High Representative for Gaza of the US-led Board of Peace. President Trump formally announced that the board had reached an agreement on the complete disarmament of Hamas and other armed groups back in July. Hamas said a day later that it had accepted the latest version of the roadmap for the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire, but it conditioned weapons arrangements on a complete halt to what it called aggression, an Israeli withdrawal and progress on reconstruction. The ceasefire took effect in last October. Since then, Gaza-based health authorities say Israeli attacks have killed more than 1,250 people and injured more than 4,100 others.
And hope has turned to despair in Gaza after Israel rejected Washington's latest plan to end the conflict. Residents say they fear the decision means more bloodshed, displacement and uncertainty.
Palestinians in Gaza City have expressed disappointment after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected US President Donald Trump's latest Gaza plan. Residents said they had hoped the proposal would bring an end to the conflict and ease months of killing, destruction and displacement.
We were happy in the beginning that the war would stop for us. In general, it was excellent joy for the people of Gaza. Now, with Netanyahu's decision, it disappointed us honestly. We felt like we are going backwards.
For many, the continuing uncertainty has deepened concerns over how long the suffering in Gaza will continue.
We were surprised that he rejected the plan. We have no one but God to look for us. We want the war to end, for the suffering of Gaza to end, the killing, strikes, displacement. Every day there are assassinations. Every day there are injured and killed people. We want to live like the rest of people, live like the rest of the countries.
The President appealed to those involved in the negotiations to consider the impact of repeated delays and disagreements on civilians. Hamas says it remains committed to the roadmap agreed with mediators in Cairo. But for residents in Gaza, the immediate concern remains an end to the conflict and the uncertainty surrounding their daily lives.
And joining us now is Eylon Levy, former Israeli national spokesman. Eylon, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, let's begin with the politics. How serious or damaging is this public disagreement between Netanyahu and Trump?
I think President Trump and the Americans have said this, know that Israel is in election season now, and in elections, Netanyahu has to be very attentive to public criticism. The fact is, in Israel, nobody believes Hamas is going to disarm voluntarily. And that's because Hamas has said so itself. It's unfortunate that this is being framed as Israel rejecting the plan while Hamas accepts it, after Hamas voided it of content. The Board of Peace has been very clear. Under the plan, first Hamas must disarm, then Israel will withdraw. But Hamas said, yes, we will disarm if Israel withdraws first. That's not how it works. It's the other way around. So we need to see the real disarmament of Hamas, the full demilitarization of Gaza. That's the way to end this war for good. That's the way to create a pathway to peace and reconstruction. It's not going to happen if Hamas is trying to use those weapons as leverage to force an Israeli withdrawal, instead of doing what the Board of Peace is demanding and disarm fully and immediately.
Okay, as you said, Israel says there'll be no withdrawal until Hamas is fully disarmed. But realistically, how's that achieved without an open-ended military presence in Gaza?
It's not just Israel saying that there will be no withdrawal until Hamas is disarmed. The Board of Peace is saying that, not just in a tweet last week. Last night, Nikolai Mladenov, the Director General of the Board of Peace, gave a rare interview to Israeli media. And he said that until there is full decommissioning of Hamas's weapons, Israel is not expected to withdraw. The fact is, the Hamas government of Gaza is still committed to the destruction of Israel and the annihilation of its people. And October 7th taught Israel a very big lesson about the dangers of dangerous illusions. No one believes that Hamas is going to disarm voluntarily. Hamas itself has said it has no intention to disarm. So we need to see full international pressure on this terrorist organization that dragged the whole Middle East into a barbaric regional war with the October 7th massacre to disarm fully. Unless that happens, there can be no reconstruction in Gaza, or the reconstruction will just mean the reconstruction of Hamas and the reconstruction of all its tunnels to wage another war. Hamas has to disarm. That's the key to any future progress.
Okay, so Hamas has, though, said they accept the roadmap with conditions. Now, why not test that commitment through negotiations before rejecting the plan altogether?
I think Israel believes that this plan is doomed to failure and that giving it a chance will only make things worse. Because while Hamas drags its feet and refuses to disarm, the world puts in an international force of mostly soldiers from Islamic countries in Gaza that would act to shield Hamas from the IDF. The original 20-point plan says that Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence will get an amnesty. Now we're talking about having a foreign military force in Gaza that will stand between the IDF and protect Hamas terrorists who are refusing to disarm and refusing peaceful coexistence. As I said, the October 7th massacre taught Israelis a very dangerous lesson about believing dangerous illusions. And Israel believes that if you put a foreign military force inside Gaza, while Hamas continues to refuse to disarm, that will allow Hamas to buy time. It will allow Hamas to rebuild its jihadist army instead of dismantling. And Israel wants to see full pressure on the Hamas regime that started the barbaric October 7th war to disarm and not to be given any more excuses to keep the Middle East in conflict.
Okay, Elon, more than 1,250 Palestinians have reportedly been killed since the ceasefire took effect. At what point does Israel's continued military action become impossible to defend?
What is impossible to defend is the fact that Hamas is continuing to rebuild its terrorist army in order to stage another October 7th massacre. Since it accepted the ceasefire and agreed that it would disarm, agreed that it would dismantle, agreed that it would relinquish power, Hamas has gone back to its terrorist activities, rebuilding its terrorist army, keeping the people of Gaza under its oppressive terrorist regime. Israel has no intention to let the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre plan another barbaric attack in plain sight. And that is why the key to any progress, the key to peace, the key to reconstruction is Hamas disarming, doing exactly what it committed to do under the October ceasefire, instead of trying to rearm in plain sight and expect that the world is going to give it time.
Elon, my last question to you. Why should Israelis or Palestinians believe further military pressure will produce a result it hasn't delivered so far?
Because Hamas is a shadow of what it was when it launched the barbaric October 7th massacre, invaded Israel to behead people, commit barbaric acts of sexual violence, and steal over 250 hostages, including women and babies and elderly people, and bodies to use as bargaining chips. If Hamas is given a breather, it will use that to rebuild its terrorist army, and that's exactly what it is doing now. Hamas's leaders need to understand that their backs are against the wall, that international patience is up, that they don't get to rebuild their rockets and rebuild their tunnels. They dragged the Middle East into a barbaric war 3 years ago. It was a horrific mistake, and they need to be consigned to the dustbin of history so Israelis and Palestinians can move towards a future of peace together and not be held back by their barbaric extremism.
Elon, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime this evening. I appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
We'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Heat waves are becoming a direct threat to Georgia's economy, according to new data. From dinner tables to power bills to bank loans, rising temperatures are starting to leave a mark. Nini Nikolashvili in Tbilisi explains what the numbers show and why experts say the time to act is now.
Georgia is heating up and fast. National climate data shows average temperatures have already climbed by up to 0.7 degrees in some regions, with a rise of nearly 4 degrees possible by the end of the century if emissions keep climbing. The World Bank warns that without adaptation, eastern Georgia's grain harvests could shrink by up to 60% in a worst-case long-term scenario. That kind of shortfall means higher food prices and less income for farmers. It also hits the banks. When crops fail and incomes drop, families and businesses struggle to repay loans, and the National Bank of Georgia has modeled these too. Analysts say that in a severe heatwave scenario, economic growth could slow by nearly 0.5 percentage point, and a bank capital reserves could shrink, even if buffers currently hold. Hotter summers also raise cooling costs, strain hydropower output, and cut productivity for outdoor workers in construction and agriculture. Infrastructure feels it too. Heat damages roads and power grids, while warmer weather conditions add to risks such as mudslides and landslides. However, a $74 million initiative backed by the government, the Green Climate Fund, Switzerland and Sweden, is working to strengthen weather monitoring, build early warning systems, and help vulnerable communities prepare before disaster strikes. But experts say this is a warning and that Georgia still has time to act. But they say it means investing now rather than paying a much larger price later in lost harvests, higher bills, and damaged homes. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Britain's exceptionally dry summer is entering a more dangerous phase as another heat wave approaches. Temperatures could reach 36 degrees, intensifying drought conditions and pushing the threat of wildfires even higher. Zainab Faraj-Zeta reports.
Another heatwave is on the way to the UK, with temperatures expected to reach around 36 degrees Celsius across parts of England and Wales later this week. And after an exceptionally dry summer, there are growing concerns about what another spell of hot weather could mean for areas already affected by drought. July was the driest month on record for England and Wales, with 19 counties recording 1 millimetre or less of rainfall throughout the entire month. Half of England is now officially in drought, while all of Wales is also experiencing drought conditions. The prolonged dry weather is also increasing the risk of wildfires. Over the weekend, more than 80 firefighters tackled a blaze at Holmfen in Cambridgeshire, while a major incident was declared in Nottinghamshire after several fires put significant pressure on emergency services. In Hampshire, firefighters have also been dealing with a fire in the New Forest after a vehicle fire spread to nearby Heathland. And there is little relief in sight. Temperatures are expected to climb from Tuesday, reaching the mid-30s across large parts of England and Wales by Wednesday and Thursday. The Met Office says it is considering whether to issue extreme heat warnings, including potentially rare red warnings. This comes after the UK recorded 35 days with temperatures above 30 degrees this year, already a new national record. So the concern now is that another period of intense heat combined with prolonged dry conditions could put further pressure on water supplies, agriculture and the emergency services, while increasing the risk of more wildfires. Zainab Faraj-Zeta, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Away from Britain's heat emergency, we turn now to the continuing fallout from the conflict involving Iran. Moscow is cautiously restoring its nuclear workforce at Iran's Bushehr facility after withdrawing hundreds of personnel during the fighting. But any full return depends on Washington and Tehran reaching a final agreement to end the conflict. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow reports.
Russia has begun sending its nuclear specialists back to Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, months after evacuating most of its employees from the site amid attacks in the region. Rosatom chief Alexei Likhachov says the first 5 engineering specialists have already been returned to the station, bringing the number of Russian personnel there to 25. Likhachov says another group of several dozen specialists could arrive within the next 2 weeks unless a major escalation takes place, and that the Russian workforce at the project could reach around 100 by this autumn. The head of the company also says the full return to the pre-war staffing levels would only be possible once there are final arrangements between Washington and Tehran to end the fighting. Earlier this year, the Bushehr area came under attack several times during the US-Israel conflict with Iran, including on the 17th of March when a projectile hit a structure around 350 meters away from the reactor. The reactor itself was not damaged. The site is particularly sensitive because the US and Israel repeatedly said Iran must not be able to acquire nuclear weapons, putting any nuclear facility in the country under intense scrutiny. Rosatom began evacuating personnel in stages. By April, Russia said the final evacuation had brought the total number of Russian personnel leaving the plant to more than 400. Dasha Chernyshova for A News in Moscow.
The conflict is also forcing countries across the region to rethink how they protect their energy supplies. Pakistan is considering an emergency oil arrangement with Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Qatar. The scheme would give Islamabad access to Gulf-owned stocks during a crisis without the cost of building its own strategic reserve. Mariam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan is considering a new way to strengthen access to oil supplies during an international crisis. On Sunday, Pakistani officials said a commercial bonded storage scheme was being considered with Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. Under the proposal, the 3 countries would store crude oil and petroleum products on secure Pakistani territory at their own cost, while also being able to supply international markets from there. Pakistan would not own those stocks, but in event of a conflict, it would have the right to purchase the stored oil and use it for domestic requirements. The proposal has been sent to the Economic Coordination Committee on the directives of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, with a decision expected next week. Pakistan imports around 90% of its energy requirements. Domestic oil production is about 70,000 barrels a day, compared with the demand of roughly 500,000 barrels. The country also has no strategic petroleum reserves. Officials estimate 1 month of crude reserves would cost around $500 million. An underground storage system could require another $300 to $400 million. The proposal comes as a conflict involving the United States and Iran has disrupted oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz and pushed global petroleum prices higher. For Pakistan, the proposed arrangement could provide access to foreign-held oil during a conflict, as the country remains heavily dependent on imports and faces a higher cost of building strategic reserves of its own. Mariam Sia, A News, Islamabad.
From securing supplies during a crisis to opening alternative routes for trade, countries are rethinking how vital goods move across the region. Uzbek exporters are gaining a more competitive gateway to Europe through the Caspian Sea. Kazakhstan is introducing preferential port tariffs as both countries expand their use of the Trans-Caspian corridor. Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Uzbek exporters will now have more favorable conditions for moving fertilizers and petroleum products across the Caspian Sea, as Kazakhstan's port of Kuruk introduces preferential tariffs for these shipments. The agreement was reached by the Railway Administration of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. It comes as the two countries are increasing their use of the Trans-Caspian International Transport Road, which connects Central Asia with the Caucasus, Turkey and Europe. Kuruk's location gives it an advantage. The port is among the closest maritime gateways to southern Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Its capacity has also improved. After dredging works in 2024, the time needed to process a ferry fell from 20 to 12 hours. Ferries can now carry an additional 500 tons of cargo. The growing role of these roads is reflected in the figures. Uzbek cargo handles through the port of Aktau and Kuruk increased by more than 60% in 2025. In the first half of this year, around 50,000 tons of transit cargo from Uzbekistan and more than 1,700 containers passed through Aktau, while container transit along the road through Kazakhstan increased 3.8 times between 2022 and 2025. The new tariff preferences could further strengthen the corridor as Uzbekistan expands alternative routes to international and European markets. Sevil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Rwanda is again being discussed as a possible transit hub for migrants deported from Europe. Kigali says it's in early talks with several countries in Europe, but no deals have been reached. Michael Baleke reports.
Rwanda is exploring a new role in Europe's migration policy as a possible transit point for deported migrants. The government says it is holding preliminary talks with several European countries. But Kigali is stressing one thing: no agreement has been reached. Officials have not named the countries involved or given details of how such an arrangement would work. The talks come as European governments face pressure to increase deportation of people whose asylum claims have failed. Rwanda has already been involved in similar migration arrangements. It's previously agreed to receive some migrants deported from the United States. For Rwanda, such an arrangement can bring financial benefits. In 2002, Rwanda also agreed a deal with Britain to receive asylum seekers with payments worth millions of dollars going to Kigali. The plan was abandoned before any deportations to Rwanda could begin. But such deals have also drawn criticisms from rights groups over concerns about the protection and legal status of deported migrants. For now, the talks are still at an early stage, with Kigali waiting to see whether they can lead to a formal arrangement. Michael Baleke for A News in Kampala.
After the break, we'll take a look at other top stories making the headlines today. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Russia and Ukraine have traded accusations after mass overnight drone attacks left at least 13 people dead in Russia and dozens injured on both sides.
Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of launching large-scale overnight drone attacks, with casualties reported on both sides. At least 13 people, including a child, have been killed and 39 others injured in a Ukrainian drone attack on the Russian city of Nizhnekamsk, according to local authorities. The overnight strike targeted industrial and civilian sites in Tatarstan, around 800 kilometers east of Moscow, and reportedly damaged a major oil refinery. Russia's defense ministry said its forces intercepted and destroyed 456 Ukrainian drones over several regions, Russian-annexed Crimea and the Black Sea and Sea of Azov. Ukraine, meanwhile, said Russia launched 202 drones overnight, along with missile attacks on several regions. In the southern port city of Odessa, authorities said at least 14 people were injured and residential buildings were damaged. Ukraine's Air Force said 174 drones were intercepted or suppressed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also reported strikes in several other regions, including Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy and Zaporizhia.
From the pressures of war to the pressures of migration, residents of Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta are demanding urgent government and European help as the city struggles with overcrowded migrant reception centres.
Hundreds of Ceuta residents took to the streets, demanding action over the migration crisis in the tiny Spanish enclave. They're calling on the Spanish government, European institutions and other public authorities to urgently address the overcrowded situation facing the city. Christians, Muslims, Jews and Hindus joined unions and local authorities at Constitution Square on Sunday.
Ceuta cannot tackle on its own a situation that far exceeds its capabilities and which affects the whole of Spain and Europe. For this reason, through this peaceful civic gathering, we call on the Spanish government, the European institutions and all public authorities to urgently address the reality our city is facing.
The demonstration comes after a major influx from Morocco on the 30th of July. Spanish authorities said as many as 72,000 people crossed into Ceuta after weeks of smaller arrivals. Dozens died in the rush. Most have since returned, but hundreds of unaccompanied minors remain. Spain's government says it expects to transfer some of those minors to the mainland within weeks. Youth Minister Sira Rego said the move would ease pressure on overcrowded reception centres in the enclave.
From shifting migration routes to shifting energy routes, Kazakhstan is looking to expand oil exports through Azerbaijan as war-related disruption raises fresh doubts over its main route through Russia.
Kazakhstan is considering the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, the Baku-Supsa route, and Caspian transit through Azerbaijan as additional oil export routes. According to the Ministry of Energy of Kazakhstan, it's paying special attention to the development of the transport corridor passing through Azerbaijan. The push comes amid growing uncertainty surrounding the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, or CPC, which is Kazakhstan's main export route to international markets. This pipeline carries Kazakh oil to the Russian Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. But the war in Ukraine and a series of security incidents in the Black Sea region have raised concerns. Now, analysis shows that Kazakhstan's oil exports dropped.
Oil exports through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium fell more than 20% below their original target in July, according to international analytics firm Kpler.
The decline followed a series of drone attacks on tankers near the CPC terminal at Yuzhnaya Azurovka, close to Novorossiysk. The disruptions also affected production, with Kazakhstan cutting its oil output by 14% in July compared with June.
The disruptions are also prompting Kazakh energy companies to look for alternatives. Kazakhstan's national oil and gas company, Kazmunaygas, plans to increase exports through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, the BTC, by 31% in 2026 compared with 2025, reaching 1.7 million tons. In the first 6 months of this year, 704,000 tons of Kazakh oil were transported through the port of Aktau for onward delivery via the BTC route. This stretches more than 1,700 kilometers across Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey.
Firefighters across Spain and southwestern France are battling wildfires as another heatwave raises the risk of further outbreaks.
In eastern Spain, firefighters and members of the military emergency unit battled a wildfire in the Castellón region on Sunday. Around 700 people were evacuated from the town of Cati as a precaution, mainly because of heavy smoke. The fire began on Friday near the town of Tirig and has burned at least 684 hectares within a perimeter of 19 kilometers. No casualties have been reported. Regional authorities in Valencia said they were hopeful that changing weather conditions and higher humidity would help firefighters bring the blaze under control. Crews elsewhere in Spain were also responding to wildfires in the central Segovia mountain range and the southern province of Huelva. Across the border in southwestern France, firefighters quickly contained a smaller wildfire near Saint-Jean-de-Lac. The blaze burned around 3 hectares, but authorities deployed significant resources because of the weather conditions and the risk to nearby homes. The fire comes after a much larger wildfire in France's Gironde department in late July, which scorched 42,000 hectares and forced more than 220,000 people from their homes. Authorities remain on alert as another heat wave is expected this week. Meteo France forecasts temperatures in the mid to high 30s for much of the week, with nearby Bordeaux expected to reach 39 degrees Celsius on Thursday.
Staying in Europe, France's budget minister is warning against postponing tough spending decisions until after next year's presidential election, as rising debt costs and weak growth squeeze the public finances.
France must not delay difficult decisions on public spending until after next year's presidential election. That is the warning from Budget Minister David Amiel, who says repairing the country's public finances is the government's top priority. Amiel is preparing France's 2027 budget, which is due to be presented to Parliament in the autumn. He has also called on candidates in next year's election to put forward credible spending plans rather than making expensive promises to voters. France's minority government, led by Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, plans to increase defence spending and maintain funding for green initiatives next year. But the government has limited room to reduce the deficit. Weak economic growth, rising interest payments and higher military spending are putting further pressure on public finances. Unemployment also rose to 8.3% in the second quarter, its highest level in almost 6 years. The cost of servicing France's debt is also rising. The country paid 34.5 billion euros in interest during the first 6 months of this year, 18.8% more than during the same period in 2025. With the presidential election approaching, the government faces the challenge of reducing the deficit while maintaining spending on defence and other priorities.
From all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.